The irony, of course, though, is that the most cringe thing of all is to hide behind a faceless profile to tear others down, because you're so threatened by the fact that they feel comfortable embracing their authentic selves while you feel constrained by the shackles that you put yourself in. Surely that is levels more cringe than it is to put yourself out there on the internet.
December, every sign has its own mode. I was in love with the Sagittarius.
From the Diving Board is a show hosted by me, Charlichats, dedicated to decoding digital culture by unpacking the hidden politics behind the screen. Hey divas, welcome back to my channel. Today we've got a less scripted video, I would say, a less scripted episode, because we're talking about a topic that I really have been thinking about a lot recently, and I've been seeing this rhetoric that being cringe is the necessary evil for success, that being cringe is just a necessary step to achieve your goals. And I think this is a really interesting topic to unpack from a slightly research lens, but more so just an anecdotal discussion, because I do think there is a very, very significant level and fear of appearing cringe and appearing embarrassing, and this fear of what other people think of you, particularly among young adults and teenagers at the moment. And it's really holding us back from doing the things we've always wanted to do. I think this is an interesting one from so many different perspectives. First of all, of course, there's the level of surveillance culture that we have today. So there is a legitimate threat there that potentially someone could film them, for example, pop it up online, and then they wouldn't even know that the moment that they are just trying their best and maybe they failed could be published for the world at large. Like, people have dreams about this as their worst nightmare, right? This is humiliation 101. That is now a legitimate fear that wasn't so much possible in the past when we didn't have algorithms that could potentially portray our stuff to the world at large, like TikTok For You pages, etc. But the other fear comes from this idea that being effortless and nonchalant is the epitome of cool at the moment. And my personal opinion is that this comes off the back of girl boss hustle culture and is like a pushback from this really intense individualistic capitalistic ideals of success that we saw in the 2010s. You truly couldn't get more opposite to hustle culture than not giving a at all. And I also think, as someone who is putting myself out there on the internet, and I also have kind of this like personal level of understanding, like, I get it. I'm a girly who gets it. I just thought this would be a nice way to share my insights, share my perspectives, and also encourage others to just try it. Just try that dream that you've always wanted to do. And if you have any ideas and things that have helped you, if you are currently sharing and putting yourself out there and you have taken that next step, please, I would love if we could make the comments section like a nice little feedback situation where we can all support each other through this, because I know there are so many people who wish that they knew how to just start that project and wish that they could find the courage and solidarity in doing something they haven't seen others do before. But it's very hard to do, and it's very hard to know where to start, and know without that support network and without seeing others who have done it before, it's very hard to foster that like encouragement. And yeah, that would be really lovely. It would be nice if we could inspire at least one person from our collaborative efforts to give their dreams a go. That would be really sick. That would be really radical, guys. Yeah, we don't really have too much of a script. There's a few things I want to unpack, but I think we're just going to go with the flow today. We're just going to have a little chit chat. So grab your tea, grab your coffee, pop on your trainers and go for little walkies, go for a hot girl walk. Let's get into it. Let's dive in. So what really sparked this podcast topic was the video that many of you may have seen circulate on TikTok and social media. Is an interview with the ABC and Vuong, who is a professor at the New York University, and he's also a creative writer. But in summary, Vuong basically talks about the fact that he takes a poetry course at New York University. And I think what's worth noting here is that if you're enrolled in poetry or creative writing, you must have some level of desire to express yourself and your most soulful, maybe private thoughts and emotions in a creative way. You have this pull to be able to express yourself in a creative and beautiful way. And you want to be able to share the feelings that maybe you've never been able to put into words in a way that feels poetic and beautiful. And that's why you've gone and taken this course. That's important to mention, I think, because it shows that the people in this room, that people in Ocean Vuong's classrooms and courses and lecture theatres have a strong desire fundamentally to share their inner world. And yet, the kind of gist of this interview is that he expresses the fact that when push comes to shove and when these people are given the assignment to then share their work with the rest of the class, they say, I don't want to, I'm too scared of what other people will think. I don't want to be perceived as being cringe. He says they perform cynicism because cynicism can be misread, as it often is, as intelligence. You are disaffected, you are too cool, you've seen it all. They pull back, but in fact, they are deeply hungry for sincere, earnest effort. They often do it privately. They don't want to admit to each other that they're trying really hard to do what they want to do. I think sincerity is something we deeply hunger for, particularly young people, but we are embarrassed when sincerity is in the room. Now, this quote really just plays on my mind. What I find so fascinating about the use of the word cringe in this context and the way that it is used today is to be cringe appears to be vulnerable. It's almost like authenticity and vulnerability and cringe have become synonyms, when fundamentally to be cringe, to be embarrassing, to be humiliating usually has a negative connotation that you have performed a particular behavior outside of the norm, outside of the status quo. You've disrupted the conformist society that you're in, and you've done something perhaps negative and harmful. And yet in this context, instead it suggests that the societal norm now is to basically be a square, is to not share your opinions, is to be as personality free as possible, to really conform in a way that's really quite bland. Because the societal norm is so strong, anything that diverges from that, even the slightest divergence, has the potential to appear cringe. And I think we've gotten to the point where to share your poetry in a class designed for that very purpose, designed for fostering that very thing, is now considered cringe. And I'm not saying this in all social contexts, right? I'm really speaking more from a personal perspective in classrooms, in school. I'm not a teenager, but I have a very, very close memory of what it felt like to be a teenager. And I do remember this feeling very strongly, this feeling that all I ever wanted was to align with the values of everyone around me, but no one seemed to have very overt values. So it's sort of do we all just say nothing? Are we all just align? What are we aligning with? We're aligning with blandness. And I do remember that feeling very strongly. And I think that teenagers in particular have always had this feeling. When you grow up and when you start to figure out who you are and you're trying to see how your personality differs from everyone around you, and there's very strong social norms in school environments in particular, it can be very, very difficult to figure out who you are in that environment. But I think that it does slightly differ when you're all in a context where you all know that you want to do poetry, you all want to do creative writing, and yet you're still so afraid of the opinions and thoughts of others. Now, I think that this comes from two places, as I sort of suggested earlier. I think that this comes from the very real potential that if you shared a poem that your peers did think was bad, there is a real possibility, at least in my view, if phones are allowed in class, which I think it differs across the board in different institutions, etc. I know university, it's a lot more like every man for themselves. If you want to be on your phone, you're on your phone, but you're not going to learn, But some schools, I think that you aren't allowed to be on your phone. But I digress, that's besides the point. If people in the class are allowed to be on their phone, I guess there is this very real concern that someone would film you if you failed, right? And it's very sad that we do live in a culture and environment where that really could occur. It's very sad that this is a legitimate threat that some people feel, and it's very sad that we suddenly feel like, and I do think this is quite unnatural, we suddenly feel like it's not only the opinion of those people in our direct environment, not only the opinions of those people in that poetry class, it's the potential that the world at large would see this. As soon as someone films something and then if they put it on TikTok, the way the algorithm promotes that to the world at large means that literally anyone could see it. And now obviously that would be against like academic integrity, of course, you would hope, and lots of school norms and university norms. I'm pretty sure that's not okay. That's not okay behavior in most institutions, I would hope. Just the very fact that social media exists in this way means that there's suddenly a threat. Even if it's just a perceived threat, even if it's not actually ever going to happen, there is a potential threat for others to view this that have absolutely no idea of the context and have no idea even who you are. And that offers like a level of concern and fear that I think is quite legitimate. Like, I do think that there is a level of legitimacy here when it comes to the anxiety that some people feel when they're just sharing their inner thoughts because of this surveillance culture, social media culture that we're in now. But in the same breath, I think there's another thing going on. There is this real attitude shift, I believe, among Gen Z and Gen Alpha, where our idols used to be kind of like the hustle culture girl boss idols, right? And there's a lot to critique. There's a lot to critique in this very hyper individualistic, capitalistic representation of what success looks like. And the idols here being, you know, the Stephen Bartletts of the world, the Grace Beverleys of the world. I actually am not completely going to like drag them. I really admire what they've been able to achieve and what they've been able to do. And I admire the fact that they've just gone out there and done it. And they have these very, very, very uniquely powerful drives that I just simply don't know how I don't know if any of you guys follow Grace Beverley, but I used to follow her on Instagram, and she would do like a day in the life, and it would be the most dense day in the life I'd ever seen in my life. Like, I was like, truly, you are a superhuman. I praise these people a lot. They have their flaws. You know, the ideology, it's not for everyone. For a very long time in the 2010s and the late 2010s in particular, actually just before COVID, even during COVID, actually, I would say, there was this really, really heavy-handed focus in social media and in media in general on people who were successful through this hustle culture mindset. It was kind of one of the very few ways in which we were seeing what success could look like. There weren't really many other idols off the top of my head, at least in the algorithms that I was in, I have to say, because this could be completely different in other contexts and cultures. But in the algorithms I was in, I really was very heavily bombarded by these very highly ambitious and driven people who had this very specific idea of success and how to achieve that. There wasn't a lot of diversity. And I think that that really created, particularly for a lot of Gen Z who came out of the pandemic, suddenly young adults suddenly having to figure out, you know, their lives and their careers and next steps in face of not only a global pandemic, but the climate crisis, the rising far right, social welfare policy that maybe wasn't sufficient to be able to support their needs, a housing crisis in Australia. I do say that a lot, and I forget to caveat that I am so grateful to live in Australia, in a country that has such a heavy focus on social welfare policy. We really have a lot to be grateful for in this country, and I know it's not perfect and there's a lot going on here that is not ideal, but God bless, I don't even believe in God bless our social welfare system and our healthcare system in particular, because while it may not be perfect, it is so I am so grateful to live in a country that really actually has a fundamental care for human rights at a base level and a fundamental care for social welfare policy. It is so brilliant to see that our taxpayer money actually does go to really important social causes, and I cannot praise that enough, and I feel like I don't praise that enough. So I wanted to add that in there. Where were we? We were talking about Gen Z and how we've emerged in this era where there's a lot to be threatened by. There's a lot to be scared of. It can feel like, for many young people emerging and trying to figure out what they want to do with their lives, what we do won't have a tangible impact anyway. The next step that a lot of people go to is, well, I won't do anything. Well, I don't really care at the end of the day. I'm not going to care because caring means disappointment. And I'm just going to sit back and do nothing and be apathetic about the whole thing and be very nihilistic about the whole thing. I think that makes sense, right? In face of all this chaos, in face of realizing and recognizing that the people who ultimately do make the most influence on our world, on our society, are the people in power, it just can feel very hopeless for us. We can feel very hopeless. We can feel very dismayed by the situation. You can hold two truths at once. I think that firstly, it's a valid response. But secondly, I don't think we should stay there. I actually think that we need to take that feeling and put it into action and mobilize it, because it's actually not true that we can't make a difference. That's what these people in power want us to believe. But actually, there is significant power in numbers and collective action and mobilizing together to achieve big things. That is why our system is democratic, at least here in Australia. And we have to cling to those democratic rights with so much veracity right now. It is so important that we actually use our democratic rights. But to get back to the feeling of cringe, wow. Sorry, I didn't mean to go all manifesto on you guys. In face of all of this chaos, though, it does make sense to want to be nonchalant. As a result of kind of prioritizing and idolizing this feeling of indifference, we've then idolized people who appear to be nonchalant on the internet and kind of in the world at large. And we idolize these people who have this feeling and essence of effortless chic, that they're successful financially or however so because they haven't even tried. And I do think this goes hand in hand with the way that we're feeling about the world. If we're seeing people who appear to be nonchalant as still being successful, then that kind of reinforces our nihilism and our own indifference and apathy about the world, because it suggests that we could also be successful while doing nothing. The unfortunate truth for you, if you are in this camp and believe this, is that the people who are successful, I actually have no evidence to support this claim, but I'm going to go out and say that this is almost 100% true. And that's how you know it's a good researcher. I'm joking, but this is my theory, right? No one who is successful and has an essence of nonchalance, unless they're a nepo baby, no one is actually nonchalant in that position. It is all a performance and it is all a lie, because to appear nonchalant while being successful, while landing a job, say, on the West End, while landing a job like in Hollywood, is completely impossible unless you're a nepo baby, unless you have network connections. Okay, I will caveat that. There's no way that you cannot try and be successful. It's just not the way the world works. And so the irony being is that the people that we view to be nonchalant are usually actually the least nonchalant people ever, because they're trying so hard that they're even trying to manipulate their social and self-image to appear that they're not even trying. And I'm not even criticizing that, but I'm just saying that we have to really be to appear nonchalant is actually a talent and an art and requires significant level of effort. And we need to remember that when we're idolizing these people. I want to talk about this word cringe though. And I want to talk about the fact that I think maybe we're using the word cringe completely wrong. And I think that we need to redefine the way that we use the word cringe and what we define as being cringe. Because if we're consistently defining cringe as being authentically yourself and being vulnerable and putting yourself out there, we're barring ourselves from ever being ourselves, and we're barring ourselves from ever putting ourselves out there creatively, right? We're barring ourselves from taking a chance.
Let's make fun of the girl who took a risk and put herself out there creatively.
It's really sad. Why are we doing that to ourselves? Because the thing is, right, is that I truly believe that these people who hide behind these little cowardly fake profiles just to haunt people and to troll people, those people are the ones who want to be authentically themselves the most. Those people are the ones who wish the most that they could be creative, that they could pursue their own dreams, that they could do something unusual, that they could do something that's outside of the social norm and status quo in whichever random state they live in, whichever random community they live in, right? Those people are only further entrenching themselves in not putting themselves out there by haunting other people. If you were in that position, it's a weird thing to be guys, put yourself in the shoes of a troll. I understand this is a bit niche, this is a bit unique. We're here now, so we're going to do it. If you were a troll, okay, imagine this. Imagine you are so hypersensitive about the way that you believe that people will view you if you put yourself out there and do something different. You're so insecure about doing something outside of the social norm for maybe a myriad of reasons that potentially are not in your control. You may have been brought up in a horrible environment. You may not have much self-love. There are lots of different reasons, right? We don't need to go into it, but there are lots of reasons, and it is ultimately quite sad. But let's say you are in that position and you then see other people who are putting themselves out there and you feel threatened by that. You feel like it's not fair that those people get to put themselves out there and that those people have a level of courage and self-love that you clearly don't have. So you create this little weird profile and you troll them. You send them hate messages. You consistently send them hate because you want to tear them down to your level because you're miserable and you want everyone to be miserable. How on earth are you then going to pluck up the courage to ever put yourself out there if you've consistently reinforced in your mind that putting yourself out there deserves hate. You maybe had your walls up, right? But now you've created a jail cell. Your little troll situation is your own prison. And this is why every time I get hate comments, I actually just think it's so sad now. I actually just think, gosh, these people are never going to be able to do anything exciting or cool that they want to do. I don't even mean exciting or cool from my perspective, from their perspective, because they are so miserable that they're trying to make me miserable. The only reason I get sad about it is because I'm like, damn, that sucks for you. Like, you enjoy your weird little hole of a house basement that you're probably sitting in. The irony isn't lost on me. And I think that when we redefine these behaviors and we redefine what cringe means, it is so obvious to me that actually the most cringe behavior is hate. Yeah, I think if we redefine what cringe means and we redefine what's actually cringe behavior, it feels very obvious that actually the most cringe behavior is to troll someone, to sit in your basement and troll someone for trying and putting yourself out there authentically. I also think cringe behavior is not caring about human rights. Cringe behavior is not caring about your peers, not caring about your colleagues, not caring about your community, being self-absorbed and not doing anything for anyone else other than yourself. Tearing others down because you're so threatened by their success, because you can't bring yourself to actually do the dreams that you wanted to do. If we redefine what cringe means, I think we'd actually use it in a much more powerful way, in a much more effective way, rather than cringe behavior being young people just giving something a go. Like, tell me how that's actually cringe. It's not. And if you're still not convinced that being cringe should be embraced, or at least being authentic and vulnerable should be embraced to allow you to achieve your goals, I think one of the best antidotes is to think of yourself as an older person, to think of yourself as an elderly person surrounded by loved ones, surrounded by grandchildren, children, if you have them, your friends' children, your extended family, and the stories that you want to be able to share and tell, and the words of wisdom that you want to be able to share and tell. Because there is nothing cooler, there is nothing more chic than an old person who has lore to divulge. There is nothing more chic than sitting down with a cup of tea with an elderly angel, discussing all the crazy things they did in their youth, discussing all the random side quests they had, guys. We can't live a life without side quests, okay? I'm telling you, I am the queen of side quests. I do a side quest every 3 months, okay? I've got about 5 side quests at the back of my mind that I want to get onto quickly. We need a life rich with side quests. Life is not worth living if you don't have a side quest to talk about. And I just really, truly, this is my personal opinion, and not everyone's going to agree with this, but I really, truly can't think of anything worse than getting to the age of 65 and realizing I stayed in the same 9-to-5 career since I was 25. That is my personal version of hell. It's just a bit of fun. It's just silly. And I think that we should take this nonchalance in our stride and use it in the complete opposite direction, which is, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day, so why not give it a go? That framing completely changes the vibe and outcome of this type of thinking that we have right now, completely shifts the narrative. And I think at the end of the day, when people say that being cringe is a necessary step to being successful, I think what they mean here is being vulnerable and authentic is the necessary step for success. And by success, obviously, we could unpack that for days, but it's success however you want to define it. But usually, if you want to be successful in any industry, you do have to be authentic and vulnerable, particularly the creative industry, because it's not cringe to share your poetry in a class designed to learn poetry. In fact, it's beautiful, it's authentic, it should create community and a level of intimacy in a classroom space that really a lot of us crave and really a lot of us don't get from everyday life today. Maybe it doesn't just come from fear, but it comes from a lack of trust. A lack of trust in our peers, a lack of trust in society, a lack of trust in the world, a lack of trust in our life, because everything feels so uncertain. And if we can foster that level of trust among us, in our communities, in our social friendship groups, in our relationships, in our families, then I think that we can go a long way. Usually it does work out. usually, as long as you're following your goals, your dreams, your love, it will all work out, my queens, my angels, my divas. I hope you enjoyed this bonus episode today. It was really fun to film. It was really fun to chit chat. I feel like I've actually just let go a lot of pent up energy around this topic, because I also feel, particularly putting my thoughts out there on the internet, coming from a background that's very not aligned with social media, I consistently have these weird moments where I watch back my content from this weird lens where I'm like, oh my God, everyone in my workplace is going to think I'm such a weirdo freak. And like, there's no way that they could ever see this as a legitimate thing to do. This is so weird and lame and strange, and no one else has ever done this in their lives before. First of all, not true. Second of all, the call is coming from inside the house, babes, because no one's ever said that to me. That's my own thoughts. That is my own brain that I need to address. And on that, I hope you guys are having a beautiful week, a beautiful day, a beautiful weekend. And I will see you guys in my next episode, which is a video essay that I am very, very, very hyped for. Make sure to follow me on Instagram and Substack. Anyway, love you guys. I hope you guys are doing well, and I will see you in my next episode. Bye.